Welcome to Fringe Element here on the Full 40 Sports Network. My name is Braden Gall. You can follow me on Twitter at Braden Gall.
And my name's Mitch Light. I guess I'm supposed to say my name since Braden just pointed at me, and I am Braden's good. Am I a good friend? Are we good friends?
I would call you a great friend and a mentor even.
Okay. I am Braden's mentee. Is that the word? I'm Braden's friend and former colleague at Athon Sports, and we've done lots of podcasts together. I currently work at The Athletic. I'm a college football editor, and you can reach me on Twitter at Mitch Light.
Would you like to tell everybody where they can hear you doing your own podcast work now? Why don't you do some shameless self-promotion here, Mitch?
Thank you. Thank you, Braden. I am the co-host of Stars Matter, a recruiting podcast that can be found at The Athletic. It's part of the Andy Staples Show feed if you're looking for it, wherever you get podcasts. And Ari Wasserman, our national recruiting writer, and we just talk once a week. Every Thursday morning, we talk recruiting, a lot of big picture stuff. Sure, we hit on the big commitments of the day, but a lot of trends, a lot of theory, a lot of geography actually in recruiting. We've started, I think, at the end of August, and we've had a great time, and the show seems to be doing pretty well. So we're going to keep doing it.
There you have it. Of course, Mitch was my boss for a while at Athon Sports, managing editor at Athon Sports, now with The Athletic. So we're gonna have a really sort of interesting show today. It will certainly be football. We didn't do a ton of football talk last week on the show as we dive super deep into name, image, and likeness. But today I want to sort of have sort of a deeper conversation, because I was on a Big Ten podcast recently with some friends of mine that are big time Big Ten fans, and there's a lot of sort of external narratives about the SEC, and certainly lots of complaints from other people, other fans, other networks, even about ESPN and their relationship with the SEC. So we thought we would do a couple of different things on the show today, which is to arm SEC fans with some information, some data to maybe push back on some of the narratives, but also have a really, hopefully, thoughtful conversation where we reflect on some of the things that maybe we need to be doing better as SEC media or SEC fans or whatever. So I want it to be sort of a two-way street here on this conversation. We're going to talk about the SEC chant. We're going to talk about SEC bias. We're going to talk about mainstream media and how it affects your coverage of your favorite team. So it's going to pull back the curtain a little bit on how college football and the SEC and the business of it all is covered. And hopefully you guys will leave the conversation smarter and better off and more equipped to handle maybe some Twitter debates or some debates at the bar about why Ole Miss being number one in the playoff rankings doesn't actually benefit ESPN in any financial way whatsoever. So I know that's a lot of weird, heady stuff, Mitch, but I'm looking forward to a conversation with you today on the show.
Yeah, I have no idea what you just said right there, but no, yeah, no, this stuff's interesting. I mean, anytime we kind of talk media stuff, it's fun, and I think there's a lot of common sense to how the media works, and there's a lot of misinformation out there about how the media works. So let's dive in.
So before we do, also coming up a little bit later on in the show, you will get a Vanderbilt State of the Union from some guy named Mitch Light. So you'll get that a little bit later on in the show as we continue our State of the Union tour through the SEC. Erin off today. She's got some family stuff she's working through and dealing with. So thinking about her at the Erin Dugan, of course, if you want to get involved. She does such great work putting the show up on YouTube. So make sure you check out the YouTube page. And of course, Fringe Element is brought to you by Jasper's. Jasper's is over on West End. It is the next evolution of the sports bar from Four Top Hospitality here in Nashville. They have a phenomenal new game room. They got Pop-A-Shot, skee ball, shuffleboard, air hockey, all kinds of cool stuff to go along with their great food and great drink specials, and always free parking. They've got a couple of other restaurants down in Alabama and Mississippi. So if you're looking for other Four Top Hospitality spots to go eat and watch games, make sure you check out the website there, Four Top Hospitality. Mitch, your favorite sports bar while watching tournament games, game at a bar?
Does darts count?
Yeah, of course.
Love darts. Back
old school.
Nashville residents can appreciate this.
Oh, I know exactly where you're going on with this.
back in my day, Braden, after college,
this was a very smoky place.
No. I am not talking about that place. What's the name of it?
Well, no free ads. Go to Jasper.
Okay, no free ads. I'm not talking about that place. Yeah. Back after when I moved back to Nashville in the late 90s after college, when Second Avenue was still a place that was pretty barren but had a few cool spots, there was an Irish pub down in Second Avenue where we would go have some frosty cold beverages and throw darts all the time and have a great time. We'd go there a lot. Now I wouldn't go near Second Avenue on a Friday night.
And what's ironic is that it's like more clean now. Like it's a cleaner, nicer avenue.
Well, this was in the sweet spot between like when I was in college in the early 90s, literally no one went downtown. There was nothing to do and it was barren. Then it started to become a place to go and it was not very crowded. It was relatively clean. So yeah, it was a good time to go downtown.
There are two really awesome, authentic, the real cork dartboards at Jasper, so you can go there. The place I'm referring to is, of course, a very, very smoky shotgun bar in Hillsborough Village. For those that know what I'm talking about, well, you know what I'm talking about. So
been there many times,
and like the neighbor place burnt to the ground. There's a lot of controversy going on with those bars. So go to Jasper's where there's no controversy, but lots of great games. Again, skee ball, air hockey, and Papa Shot. Come on, during the tournament. Before we get into this very complicated media conversation, I am curious about the tournament because I know you're a huge college hoops guy, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I thought I'd just spring it on you.
Okay.
Which is we attach so much value to postseason, college football playoff success or failure to determining how good teams are. We've fought the bowl thing for years and years and years, and my stance will never change that. And I think players sitting out and coaches changing, Brian Kelly not even coaching his team in a bowl game where it could have gone to a playoff. I think we're seeing the forces in college football tell us that bowl games and outcomes don't matter. Fans, it's like the only thing they see. I don't think that's the same for college basketball. The SEC absolutely completely wet the bed over the weekend, was complete garbage. Arkansas is the only team still alive. Very disappointing for basically everybody. Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, namely, but also Alabama and LSU. Is there something to that basketball in a one-game situation is far more fluky? Like if you just have a bad shooting night, that doesn't make you the worst team, whereas football is a little bit more, that 160-minute sample size is more accurate. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, but I don't think it's fair to compare bowls in the NCAA tournament because, like it or not, in the current landscape of college football, many of the bowl games really don't matter. Even when you win, it's fun. It's good for the team. It's good for the coaching staff and all that. They get a bonus probably. But when college basketball, the entire year, the entire sport is geared towards success in the postseason. So that being said, and I'm not here to defend the SEC. Like I don't think you can say the SEC sucks because it went one team made the Sweet 16. It means that you had a lot of SEC teams not play well at the right time. You can't sit here and watch Tennessee basketball the last 6 weeks and say they weren't a good team. They had a bad game. They panicked? Did they choke?
They missed open shots.
And then once they started missing open shots, they did get a little tight and didn't play well down the stretch. Like it's such a turn in sport. Like I'm on a text thread with some friends about whatever, and they don't really follow college basketball that closely, and just raving about Miami's toughness and what a great team. And I said, and I had to look this up. I said, Miami lost by 33 points to Alabama in November. They lost to Dayton by 10 points. And these were Vanderbilt friends of mine. And Vanderbilt had literally just beaten Dayton an hour earlier. I said, it's playing well at the right time. So give Jim Larinaga credit, give Miami credit. But to answer your question, big picture, the SEC deserves to be slammed today because they didn't do well in the tournament. And Bruce Pearl, don't insult our intelligence by saying, "Oh, the SEC just beat itself up this year." I mean, give me a break. Every conference, by definition.
And I wasn't trying to. So I didn't mean to apply the bowl game conversation to the tournament. That's not what I meant to do. I meant college football playoff. Like we say, okay, Georgia, Alabama, they play in the national championship game. They're clearly the best two teams, right? Like that's what we say about college. So
your question is basketball is a flukier sport. Yes,
that's kind of what I'm getting at. Is it like okay? If you absolutely rip on the SEC right now, the SEC pissed down its leg and they deserve to be ripped on, but they were largely considered the best conference along with the Big 12 for most of the regular season. Give whichever one you want. I'm cool with saying they're second. That's fine. To say that they had a terrible weekend is 100% true, but to say that is now like one game is going to overrun 30 games doesn't seem very rational to me.
Right. And I'm just kind of thinking this through. In college, if you had a true tournament in college football, if you went 2 versus 7, I think in football, they win 90% of the time because it's harder to upset in football and just in a playoff format. In basketball, it might be 70% of the time. Like, I just think it's easier to pull off a one game upset in basketball because of shooting. It's like, it's the quality of your shot. This is one of my favorite old Kevin Stallings statements. Basketball always comes down to the quality of your shot versus the quality of your opponent's shot. If you get better shots, you're usually going to win, but you got to hit those shots. And by nature of it, a wide open three, the best shooters in the world in competition only make 45% of them. So it's fluky.
I guess this is even maybe even a better way that I should have said this. If two teams in a football tournament played 7 times, the outcome is probably the same as if they played 1 time most of the time. Whereas there's a reason why basketball, baseball, and hockey, you play series because it evens out the sort of the anomalies that happen within basketball and hockey and baseball that don't happen in football, where when Georgia and Michigan line up and play, Georgia's going to win that game probably 6 out of 7 times. Sure. Just the way they did the first time. Okay, I just wanted to I wanted to point that out because they deserve to be ripped on. They had a garbage first weekend. It doesn't change how good the conference was in the regular season, in my opinion. Whereas with football, you can make that argument to some degree. You know, if Alabama had lost to Cincinnati and Georgia had lost to Michigan, I think we would say, well, maybe the top of the SEC just wasn't that good. And I think that's a more fair to do in football, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. One more point on that, and I know we need to move on, is that in college basketball, there's also enough of a sample size non-conference play to judge conferences, where in football, there's really not. And the example I always go is like the SEC got so propped up 3 years ago when Bo Nix threw a bad pass into like triple coverage and it was caught, and Auburn came back to beat Oregon. So that Pac-12 sucked. SEC was awesome because of that one play. Where college basketball, there's 10 to 12 non-conference games.
Which leads us perfectly into the beginning of this conversation that's going to be about media narrative, bias, sort of, regionality, all different things that go into how we talk about our favorite sport in college football, and in particular the SEC. Now, I've been thinking about this. When I first started at Athon back in 2007, you were working there, and the SEC chant, right? Like SEC, where like Kentucky fan was rooting for Alabama fan in like the 2009 championship game, against Texas or whatever. And when Alabama wins, they chant SEC. Auburn beats Oregon in the national title game and people are SEC, even South Carolina fans. I'm curious about this. I haven't thought about it in a while because I've always hated it, never understood it. It's rooting against your own best interest. Certainly there's a regionality and a Southern pride there. Do you think it's diminished? Do you think that the SEC fans have actually kind of come around on this? Like, SEC people are still super obnoxious. Let's be honest about us. But I don't hear it as much. I don't hear that sort of trumpeting the other team in our conference as much. What do you think?
I don't know. I would never. That's a good question. I mean, it's kind of an unanswerable question. It may be because it's been going on so long. It's just there. I don't know. I wouldn't say I hear it more or less, or it makes more sense or less sense. I mean, I think it's a natural, defense mechanism as a fan. Like, if my team's not good enough, at least I know I'm losing to the teams that are winning it all. And it's just like when your team loses early in the season in football, you probably want to see the team. Like, if you're a Tennessee fan and you lose to Auburn in week 3, and then Auburn loses 3 straight, you're not feeling too good about yourself. So I think it's just the nature of being a fan is that you want the teams that your team loses to do well. And that goes by the same thing. It's like, you want to be part of the best conference. And so I don't,
that never has happened in any other conference. Like, Michigan doesn't lose to Ohio State and then go Big 10.
Why, do you think
call into radio shows and go Big 10? It used to happen a lot in the SEC.
Do you think it has, and obviously I'm not in Columbus, Ohio, or Detroit, unlike listening to sports talk. But do you think, as a reaction to the SEC unity, that has happened? Don't you think that?
No, I think
it's fans. Go ahead.
I think it's a great question. I think it's the other way around. I think the complete annoyance of like Pac-12 fan, Big 12 fan, Big 10 fan, ACC fan, just like just total annoyance with the SEC chant. And frankly, if you are an Auburn fan and Alabama wins another title, that's going to make it harder for you to recruit. So if you chant SEC and root for Alabama, you're actually rooting against your own best interest. I actually think SEC fans have done it less. And I think it's partly because, A, it doesn't make any sense, number one. But B, I just think it's so ridiculous and obnoxious that other people are just like, come on, guys. Like, that's so stupid. Why would you root against your own team? And I actually think it's decreased. I actually think some of that has gone down over the course of the last 15 years.
No comment. I mean, I haven't noticed it,
See what I'm saying?
I haven't noticed it more or less. So, I mean, it's,
I don't hear it nearly as much. I don't get it on Twitter.
Okay.
I don't get it on radio. I don't get it.
Okay. Well, yeah, you live in those spaces more than I do. So,
and also that's very scientific of me. So
yes.
I want to point out how scientific that really is. So let's get into how media works here. We can talk Athon with magazines. We can talk athletic. We can talk podcasts. We can talk ESPN because I work for ESPN radio, and how I think one of the biggest misconceptions, and this is a really big weapon, I think, for SEC fans to use in conversations with non-SEC fans, and how to defend the coverage of their teams. There are homers in every conference. Danny Cannell, for the love of Christ, is one of the worst at it. There's that guy exists for every conference. That man or woman is out there banging the drum for their conference, no matter what league you're talking about. And the SEC's got plenty of them. But when you talk about the big market forces at play for media companies and what's in their best financial interests, has never been and will never be 4 SEC teams getting into the playoff. It's just not. Like the ESPN, and we'll get to how radio works and how magazines work and podcasts and everything else, but specifically the playoff and the committee, what is best for the rights holder of that television broadcast, in this case ESPN, is to have 4 extraordinarily large fan bases from 4 different regions of the country playing in those 3 games, I should say. That is what will make them the most money. And I always find it comical that Big Ten fan or ACC fan or Pac-12 fan thinks when the Mississippi State thing happened, like, oh, this is just ESECPN bias trying to like prop up Mississippi schools. And I'm going, that would hurt their business. And I think this is one of the biggest points fans need to understand from outside the region, but for you SEC folks,
yeah,
it's a weapon that you can use to sort of knock down those attacks a little bit.
I'm not a TV ratings expert, but wouldn't you say the ideal playoff for ESPN would be Alabama or Georgia, Ohio State, Notre Dame, USC?
Yeah.
Maybe not USC, but I think USC because of its national brand. I think Ohio State definitely. Okay, maybe Michigan, but I think Ohio State definitely. One of the SEC superpowers, Notre Dame, and then again, I think USC. I think that would be the perfect. Like if you got the executives give them some truth serum, they take that every year.
I 100% agree. What's interesting is I think you could do Penn State or Ohio State, probably one of those 2, with Michigan right in that same group. Those 3, probably one of those.
Okay,
3.
just put like Big Ten power.
Yeah,
SEC power, Notre Dame.
Yeah, exactly. And what's curious is that my first thought when you said USC, my first thought was, well, probably Texas, but then that does equal SEC in the future.
Yeah, I think Texas. I forgot about Texas. I mean, I think Texas would.
They're easy to forget.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it's. I think it's Texas is its own animal. Even when it's in the SEC, it's geographically separated enough. I mean, I know it's borders 2 SEC states.
It's in an SEC state.
Yeah, true. But like University of like the population base is so great there, and it's a national brand. So okay, let's say you didn't want USC.
But I think you're right though. Pete Carroll USC because
Pete Carroll USC was Rockstar USC. Is
right.
Is Lincoln Riley going to be? I think he will be Rockstar USC, but like a really good Clay Helton team, maybe not. They don't. That would not have the sex appeal nationally.
I think if you got. And again, if we're getting teams all into the playoff, we're assuming that they're all great at this point. I think you're right. It's either Alabama or Georgia or Clemson. I think Clemson would fit in there, but I really think it's Bama. I think Bama or Georgia.
Clemson is a national brand, but it's just not it's not in a state with a ton of
right.
And like Birmingham, Alabama's not huge, but Birmingham, as you know, is the highest college football TV rating. Like even if Alabama or Auburn aren't playing.
Ohio State, Notre Dame, Alabama, USC, which I think is the 4 that you said, would probably be my gut reaction to what if I was ESPN and we were sitting there picking teams to make the most money for ourselves. I feel like an elite version of those 4 teams with an Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, USC matchup. And then 2 regions of the country playing in the championship game would make the most money. So I think if somebody comes at you and you're an SEC fan and says, oh, they're just propping people up, blah, 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 blah. Like that is not ever what they want in the playoff. Now that's just the playoff. Now, how about selling magazines at Athon Sports, which I still work for and you used to work for? And we've talked about this before on other shows, which is, and this happened with Notre Dame, strangely. People just assumed that we would pick Notre Dame very highly or X, Y, or Z team really highly because we thought it would sell magazines. And we actually had data that showed us it doesn't matter who we picked highly in the magazine. We were going to sell magazines based probably on how good your team was that year, right? Like what
how good and what the cover looked like. We were always told, basically, I was always told that, the inside of the magazine is yours. The cover is mine, meaning like marketing, like we picked the people who are going to be on it and we actually picked the photos, but the circulation department would give us, and I would work with the circulation department on who's on covers and stuff. So yeah, it never once in my 18 years at Athon did I say, let's go with Alabama over this team because we think it'll sell more magazines. It just we want our egos were too big trying to get the predictions right. No, seriously, yeah, it just never came across. Now, one thing that we were always trying to reach new markets, so we wouldn't pick a team like Ole Miss number one to sell magazines, but we might do we might spend more money on a photo shoot with Ole Miss to sell more to speak to those fans, like, hey, we care about your team. These other magazines, they're not even going to have an Ole Miss guy. They're going to have an Ole Miss guy with 4 other guys. The Alabama guy is going to be huge and it's going to be real small. Eli Manning. We're going to send a photographer out there and we're going to spend the money and have a really sweet Ole Miss only cover. And we're going to have a Mississippi State only cover. So we tried to kind of like speak to the fan bases and say, hey, we see you. We care about you. Please buy our magazine. But it didn't affect any editorial decisions. We tried to spread the wealth as far as features, like with the way our magazine worked. We had, 6 pages on every team and we had room for about 4 to 5 SEC features. Like, hey, we've done an Alabama feature three years in a row or 3 of the last 4 years. Let's be sure we hit Mississippi State if there's an interesting story there. So we definitely tried to spread the wealth.
Well, and I would argue the way that Mississippi State would make a magazine company like Athon money would be having a marketable star like Dak Prescott and being very good. That would make us more money than like actually being good going into the year and actually having a good football team would make more money than us picking them a certain place or whatever. Like that would not have any impact on it. Like you said, the cover and how good you are is far more, we would invest in catering to the teams that were good to those, but only like, because we already catered to all the other big teams anyway. Like we already had Penn State covers and Notre Dame covers and Ohio State covers and Texas covers. And it's only when like West Virginia had Pat White and Steve Slayton did we go, oh, you know what? We need to give that cover some love because we know we're going to sell a bunch of magazines in West Virginia. That doesn't affect whether or not we pick West Virginia 6th or 11th in the preseason that year would have no impact on sales. What made that magazine sell so well is we had a really sweet cover with Slayton and White that spoke to the people of West Virginia. Well, literally with mountains in the background.
Yes.
So what then is the opposite? So, and I'll speak to the ESPN radio real quickly because I want to move on to what the Athletic does and what podcasts do, which is sort of the opposite of what the mainstream world has to do. We live in a for-profit media world. That's it. Period. There's very few nonprofit media organizations. So what media, big media companies are governed by is sort of the rules of operation and of engagement that drive traffic, clicks, eyeballs, ears, whatever. And for me, I'll just speak from my experience on ESPN radio. If I were to sit down on Saturday morning with Joe Fortenbaugh and do a preview show for week whatever, we knew going into that when we planned our show, it was going to be, all right, what are the biggest 3 or 4 games of the weekend, probably involving an Ohio State team or a Michigan team this year in particular, probably involving an Alabama team, probably Georgia, and then maybe a couple of other big games that we thought were important. And really, you can't go much deeper than that because the rules of radio, literally how you charge your advertisers money, is you have to appeal to the broadest set of the audience. And you have to be talking about the biggest stories and the biggest games and the biggest teams almost all the time, or you're going to lose ratings and therefore lose revenue. So if I spent any time talking about Mississippi and Arkansas, if they weren't top 15 teams and the whole country cared about that game, which they should have, it was a great game, but they didn't, we would, in theory, lose ratings. And so ESPN radio is governed, and Fox Sports and every other radio station, they are governed by rules of business. Whereas when we get into the podcast space, or in your case, the Athletic, what I'm really happy about, Mitch, and you had to sort of talk me off this ledge at one point during our working career on a podcast, which is that there is so much more out there that people want that are underserved by those big major media companies that have to do it a certain way to make money and keep their advertisers happy, that there is all of this growth and space for us to have conversations about the Missouri quarterback battle, or the Vanderbilt way of doing things, hiring a general manager in the front office, or, whatever it may be. There are these other things are being so underserved that I think there is a lot of growth in places that are not Alabama. And I think the Athletic and podcasts, in theory, are two places that are trying to attract that audience and go after those fans.
Yeah, I'll speak to the Athletics, like our content in a minute, but like in our podcast with our recruiting podcast, we of course talk Alabama, and we spend a lot of time on Texas A&M. They signed the best class in the history of modern recruiting, but we spent 15 minutes on Arizona recruiting like 3 weeks ago, real deep dive. And Ari happened to go to Arizona, so it's not a great example, but okay, Iowa. I did a lot of research on this recruiting in the state of Iowa. Like, if you're a college football fan, I think you'll find that interesting. Could you squeeze that into a 12-minute radio segment? No, of course you could.
No way.
But we had a podcast. We have a podcast every week where we spend an hour on recruiting. So of course we're going to talk Texas A&M, Ohio State, Alabama, but we're also going to talk Arizona. We're going to talk Iowa. We're going to talk. We spent time on Massachusetts, like the best year for recruiting in the state of Massachusetts, like ever this year. They got a 5-star prospect and like 5 4-stars. So like that, you're not going to talk about that on a radio show, but you have the freedom to talk about it on a podcast. And we think that real fans who listen to podcasts, if you listen to podcasts are all niche, smart for a niche audience for most of them. If you listen to a recruiting podcast, we think you're going to find that interesting. If you're driving around on a Saturday morning, listen to ESPN radio, you're not going to find that interesting. But so as far as the content, we have a pretty big staff. We've got, we have 7 editors, and I should know this off the top of my head, maybe 30 writers. We've got a bunch of beat writers who cover teams specifically. Maybe 6 in the SEC. I don't know. You could look it up, 5 in the Big Ten, 3 in the Pac-12. And then we got national writers. And what we found, obviously, we have an Alabama writer, and Aaron Suttles does great work and caters to the Alabama fan. But what we have found is too that surveying, writing about the entire country, there's an audience out there. There's underserved markets. So when we have a national writer come in and do a story on, we keep using Mississippi State or Ole Miss as an example, right on a team that we don't cover on a beat.
Missouri.
Okay, Missouri. We actually had a Missouri writer for a while, Peter Baugh. Now he covers the Colorado Avalanche. I'm not a hockey guy. They're still called the Colorado Avalanche, right?
Yes, they are. They're the best team in the league. Yeah.
Okay. My lack of hockey knowledge is just unbelievably astounding.
Well, what's ironic in this conversation is that the Athletic has done brilliantly 2 things outside of the normal stuff, which is they cover hockey extremely well. They've got a great hockey group of writers, and EPL soccer. They're heavily invested in EPL soccer. Neither one of those 2 would be considered mainstream sports in the United States.
And also, I grew up in New Jersey, and I still don't know anything about hockey. Go Devils! So my point was that we find that we write a really good story on a team where we don't cover on a daily basis, it does well. It sells a lot of subscriptions. It gets a lot of reads because those fans, like, they appreciate it. They want to read about their team, and we think we do really good stuff. We have good writers, and we do deep dives and don't just like swoop in and talk to one person and write a 600-word story. So sure, it's kind of like what you talked about with the ESPN radio. You need the popular notes because those teams are good and they've got tons of fans. But that's one thing I like when I work with Ari on, I'm Ari's recruiting editor, that I really try and do a lot of research and talk about programs all over the country, because I know fans who don't get all the attention appreciate that stuff. So, it's a completely different world that I live in now, where at Athon, we were trying to sell magazines and so much we did was based on predictions and everything. Now it's just more on just delivering really good content. Not that we weren't doing good content at Athon, it's just a different animal.
Well, and I think that's why, hopefully, when you listen to this show, the reason we spent 2 weeks ago 17 minutes talking just Missouri Tigers football is because that market is a little underserved. And hopefully the reason you listen to this show is that, and why we're going to spend 12 minutes talking about Vanderbilt later on, is that if you're an SEC football fan and you like this show, hopefully we're giving you a whole lot of other things that sort of fulfill your SEC fandom, because you probably know everything there is to know about your favorite team. I'm not going to teach Georgia fans about Georgia football. They probably know a whole lot about that, but I can teach them about Vanderbilt and what's going on with Clark Lee, because we're going to get an interesting guest on. Maybe, I don't know if he's that interesting, and find out
very handsome
how he's building his roster and why does he have all these leadership books on the shelf and like all this other fun stuff. And hopefully that it's so. I think the number one principle I want people to take away from is that mass media, for-profit media, and we'll just use ESPN and ESPN radio as like the cutout here, because everyone likes around the country wants to pick on them. But that is that when you do work for those channels or stations or shows, it's not about what you think is interesting as a host or a writer. It is about what you think the audience will find interesting. And what I think our job is on a show like this is to find out what we think is interesting about the subject that we all love and try to go really deep into that. And so it's almost inverted. And I think you, frankly, when we were doing our podcast for Athon Sports Cover 2, check it out, shameless promotion. You and I were doing it.
Still doing that?
I with Steven Lassen,
Never heard of it.
Friend of the pod.
Yeah.
One day I came in after doing local radio and I was like, we got to start hitting play the hits. And I was like rattling off all the radio lingo that was like, this is what the science of radio is all about. And you were like, no, that's not what we're supposed to do.
Yeah. I mean, I just felt that, like I said before, people who were listening to that podcast loved college football, and hopefully they appreciated the depth of knowledge that we both had. Anyone can go and turn on for 6 minutes and tell you how great Georgia is and how great Nick Saban is. But can they tell you why Kentucky's, run the ball so well? It's because they've got, they don't recruit at the same level, but they have 3 5-star or 4-star linemen, offensive linemen, or they got to transfer. I'm just making this up. And I think people appreciate when you can dive deeper and educate them. Like I listen, for the most part, I want to be entertained, but I listen to podcasts because I want to be educated, like something that I don't know everything about. So I'll listen. I listen to a lot of NBA podcasts because I like the NBA. I'm a huge Brooklyn Nets fan, but I don't have time to watch a ton of games, but I like the NBA world. So I want them to educate me, and I'm not going to listen to it if all they do is talk about LeBron and talk about whatever. I want someone. So there's a lot of choices out there. I'm going to listen to the ones where they spread the wealth and they talk about every team. So that's kind of been my approach. And I understand when when we would record that podcast, you would come from your job as a morning talk show host in Nashville, and then we'd do the podcast. So it's a different world for you. But I find it tiresome when it's the same. And, some of the Nashville sports talk radio, I'm not in my car anymore. I don't commute and stuff, but it's just like, and I'm not a huge Titans fan. I root for the Titans, but like, I can't listen to, every time I get into the car, what are they going to do a quarterback when everyone knows a quarterback's going to be the same next year, but they still have to talk about it because that's what people, that's what. So,
and this, and I don't want to spin this, like we could go even deeper on this, which is that, the social media algorithms that are designed to crawl down your brain are driven by anxiety and conflict. And we could go down that rabbit hole real fast. And I don't want to do that. I want to keep this sort of as like a kind of like, are we holding ourselves accountable as SEC media and fans, and what can we do better? What does the rest of the country need to know about this? And I do think this is one area where we as SEC fans have to sort of take a pause and think about it. And that is the contractual obligations, which I think is a little lazy on the national landscape to say, oh, SEC has just always been in bed with the Big Ten. First of all, the Big Ten, or with ESPN, the Big Ten is the first league ever that signed a major cable contract with ESPN because there's still more eyes and ears in the Midwest than everywhere else. ESPN is financially attached to the ACC, the Big 12. I think Herb Street and Fowler called as many Big Ten games this year as anybody else. But when the SEC sold their rights from CBS to ESPN, ESPN is now basically got every single SEC football game on their platform at some point. So what I think you're going to get is the committee's not ever going to be affected by what network the team is broadcast on. I would hope, right? Like I would hope that 13 people sitting in a room deciding on who goes to the playoff will never be impacted by who called the game.
Call me naive, but I agree 100% with you.
So the argument on Twitter or with your buddies or talk radio that because one network or another network is in bed with a conference, that somehow that's going to affect who gets into the playoff, to me seems maybe, like you said, maybe I'm naive too, but that seems awfully idiotic. And if somebody on that panel is doing that, then that person needs to be removed. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to get extra coverage across the media platforms from that entity. Look at the NHL, going back to
I was going to say, look at hockey. If you watched SportsCenter, you watched ESPN over the last 15 years, you barely knew hockey existed until this year. What changed? They got hockey, but that's their prerogative. It's, it's business. I think it's a business. It's a business. Some people also say they're journalists, and there are journalists. They do great. A lot of them do great work, but they work for a company that has a bottom line, and they need to sell. They need to sell advertising, and they promote what is on their network. And I've got no problem with that. You have to just kind of see them for what they are, and it just makes sense. It just means more, Braden.
And that's that. First of all, it's such a difficult slogan because I don't like it, but it is one of the most brilliant, and I don't want to use like a political campaign analogy here, but like it is amongst the most accurate and most brilliant, succinct, taglines that anybody could have come up with. I don't like it. It makes my skin crawl when I hear it, but it's so accurate that when we do talk about the SEC, and I'm not done yet with the media side of this because I do want to get your thoughts on. Last week we said on the show there are 5 rules. We've put in 5 rules to staying classy, and that is sort of like no gunfights. The officials don't hate your team. We had some fun with don't blame kickers, like don't tweet at recruits. Like we had some, but one of them was know your media. And the SEC is pretty guilty of this. Tennessee, Florida, LSU in particular have some really like water carrying media throngs. And so I think you do have to acknowledge as an SEC fan that when you watch and I don't think Game Day does this per se, but if you're watching like Feinbaum's on ESPN,
yeah,
I do think you have to acknowledge that SEC is going to cater to the SEC fan for a lot of reasons, but that it doesn't affect. But I think your counter argument to outside people was to say, but it doesn't affect who AP voters or who's in the, like, do you think that's true? Or do you think these people are swayable in the committee room or AP voters or whatever?
Sorry, I muted myself, Braden.
It's okay.
Rookie move.
I've been trying to do it for years.
I've been trying to mute you for years. Now, I think everyone has a bias. I don't care. Everyone's from somewhere, as they say.
Yeah.
Like, is Bobby Johnson still on the committee? I think he is. So, like, Bobby Johnson played football at Clemson. He coached in the SEC. Like, he sees things through a certain lens. But I would trust that Bobby Johnson, when he's on that committee, is just votes how he thinks, and everyone votes how they think. So, like, I think it's naive to think that there are no biases there, but it's just you got to get past those biases, whatever the word is there. And so, like, does it affect? I can't sit here and tell you that every AP voter is like the most objective person out there.
Right.
Like people have, like, I don't know. I know we're talking football here, but like, I'm sure certain people out there don't like Bruce Pearl. And, if Auburn deserved to be ranked 1 at one point, did some people vote him 4th because they didn't like Bruce Pearl? Maybe. I don't know that. There's so many voters. In AP poll, there's enough voters out there to kind of overrun or overrule 1 or 2 bad apples, so to speak there. So
it definitely affects Hall of Fame voting. Don't you think?
Yeah. I think baseball Hall of Fame voting. Yeah. So I think, I've never really heard it said that way, but I think your rule number 5 is perfect. Know your media. Like, when I'm on Twitter, I have levels of salt, take it with a grain of salt. I have levels of salt with which I take tweets. And okay, that came from this person. I'm not going to give it as much credence as from this person. So you have to be educated to know who your media people are.
Can we come up with like the scale? Like fast food fries is like the most salty you could be versus like what would be the least salty you could be? Like that one doesn't mean anything. Can you give me something?
I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question. But like we were busy out all day yesterday, and we came home and I had frozen pizza for dinner because my son Gabe was out and about with friends.
Classic.
And so I had a gluten-free frozen pizza. Which you would love. And then like Heather, my wife said, she read, no, they're fine. Actually, they're fine. I know. But so she read something last night or something. She's like, I just saw like frozen pizza is about the worst thing you can have. I was like, why? She's like, so much sodium. I was like, I don't really care about how much sodium I want, She's like, well, you should. So I don't know what made me think.
No, I make, it's funny. Yeah. It's funny. Like I make soup a lot for my daughters and for my wife.
Oh yeah. Canned soup.
Like,
yeah.
Well, no, like actual, like home cooked.
Okay.
Soup.
Oh yeah. No.
Like,
yeah. Okay.
Start with onions and garlic. The problem is, and like, I don't put any salt in it.
Oh, you got to have salt in soup.
Well, my wife's always like, well, why don't you put any salt in this? And I go, and then I pull up the can of beans and it's like 82% of your daily sodium diet. And then I pull up the can of chili peppers and it's like, oh, it's 72% of your sodium diet.
You just gave your daughters 400% of the sodium.
Like, look at all this salt that's in all of these cans of beans that I've just dumped into this chili or the, white, whatever it might be. So I need to create, I'm going to think on this. Maybe next week we'll do
degrees of salt.
Yeah. I need to do, that's really good because there are certain media people.
Very salty.
Like you have control over this too. Like I just stopped following. I don't mean to pick on Danny Cannell because he's a nice guy, but like I've never seen a person go out of his way to within the college football realm to actively poke a conference while propping up another and doing it so disingenuously that it just is like, and I'm not suggesting that there's not like I love Peter Burns, but I think Peter Burns can be a homer for the SEC. Like I think he is, that's fine. But he works for the SEC network. Like
that's a good example. I don't know what level of salt he is, but I take a lot of, I think he says a lot of smart things, but I know, I know he has an agenda when he tweets. He believes it, but he's promoting the network that he works for, and that's fine by him.
He gets paid to promote the network that he works for.
Hey, what's your buddy Dari going to do once Oklahoma joins the SEC?
Oh,
he's always perfect separated of church and state.
Oh, thanks for listening to the show. We had him on a couple of weeks ago.
I didn't listen.
A couple of weeks ago, and he was.
I started listening to podcasts to educate myself.
Oh, you know what? Fuck you. It's fine. No, go listen. Dari that was the salt. And it's funny we were joking about salt. That was the spiciest I have ever heard Dari.
I will go listen to that.
Was when Lincoln Riley left and he did not pull any punches. It was very, very angry. No, he's like just perfect. He's like, oh, this is great. The conference I cover and get paid to love and cover and is now my alma mater's joining. And he's like, it's wonderful.
I always thought he had the perfect balance though, where
he's great.
He was a huge fan of his alma mater. That's fine. I get that. But it didn't affect his coverage at all because they weren't in the SEC. Now, I'm not going to think less of Dari in 5 years if he's, Oklahoma, if he's reporting about Oklahoma and I know he loves Oklahoma. That's fine. I appreciate that. It's funny that's happened.
I think it goes back to know your media.
Yes.
And also that there is space in your day as a sports fan to sort of consume everything. If you want to argue about Stetson Bennett versus JT Daniels for 12 months. There's plenty of places you can go argue and embrace debate and have like these sort of talk showy type of topics. If you want Homer radio, and I'll give schools credit this because Erin, who we talked about last week on the show, Erin and I talked about this, like she worked for Vanderbilt and put out really great content when she's like shooting documentaries of Jawan Williams at the combine and stuff. Like schools have turned into production companies too. Sure. And there is clearly space for that in your sports menu. But if a really controversial topic comes up, I don't want a homer of any team or any league to tell me the information. I want to try to get it as cleanly reported as possible. So I think what it means is you need to trust you need to find the people that are going to give it to you straight. And if you want to live in a safe space at all times and you can't handle any disagreement in your life, then you can go find media for you. Sure. That's not going to be this show. Like we're not going to do that on this show. And hopefully enough people like that. I don't know. We'll see.
Very fair. No, I think you make a good point about you can kind of, can you cut everything out? No, but if you're a sports fan who just is on Twitter or, listens to podcasts, you can not follow people. You can not listen to that podcast. If your team blew it and had a bad loss and the host and the guest are going to rip them and you don't want to hear it, don't listen.
The unfollow button is actually quite easy to use. You can just click that button and then just not follow.
You know what I found too? This has nothing to do with anything. We're just talking about media. I started to unfollow some people that I have no problem with who just feel they need to tweet about everything. Like,
you mean like crossing into the stuff that you don't care about as much?
Yeah, it was just everything. Like, I don't need your opinion on every. You don't need to be tweeting 50 times a day. Like,
So when I do
you tweet a lot, but you go in stretches, like where I won't see something from you for a while. And I'm not using you as an example. Like you don't tweet too much. I'm just saying there's certain people out there that I just like, I don't need to hear from you every every 2 minutes. And like I'm on Twitter a lot, and I tell myself I kind of have to be because of my job. Like I'm the recruiting editor. I'm not like following kids, but I kind of need to know what's going on if something breaks. So I'm on social media a lot. I just don't follow people that feel the need to tweet every 2 seconds.
So when I put out a list of my power rankings of leafy greens, and I had like Boston lettuce at 4, like above, like, like spinach at 5, that was not something that was meaningful to your life?
No, but that was fine because it was slightly creative. Like I don't need
romaine number 1,
Yeah. And there's certain this is crossing over into Braden territory, but there's certain people who feel they need to be experts on everything. Yeah, so I'm going to get myself in trouble and kicked off the pod for
No, you're good. You're good. What's funny is here's the other thing, and this is again a totally random observation. I don't understand the need, and maybe if you're a beat writer, you have to do this during the game.
Oh, the updates?
I don't understand the need to post every single play in a football game to your Twitter feed. I don't understand that. Like I'm watching the freaking game, dude.
I totally agree. Here's the only, because it's on and anyone can follow like on a score app or anything. Like the only time that I used to like that is back in the day before like the SEC network. If I was out and about and like Vanderbilt had a baseball game on a Saturday and like there wasn't an app, like, and I wanted to know what was going on. If someone was like Adam Sparks was covering the game, I wanted the updates. But we're talking about a freaking college football game that's on CBS and everyone has an app. Like you don't need to know. Like
it's literally streaming. It's streaming on your phone. Right. Just switch from the Twitter app to the other app and you can watch the game. You don't have to read the updates on Twitter.
Here's one more
Twitter
complaint and then we'll move on.
All right, we gotta go.
The need to retweet like in comment on huge national news. Like you kind of got to know your place on the Twitter food chain. Like if let's say,
this is a deep one here.
Yeah, like Georgia hires a new coach or defensive coordinator. Like I expect Bruce Feldman, my colleague, like if he didn't break it, or Stu Mandel, my boss at the Athletic, like people with huge followings in college football should be retweeting that with them. If you're a college football writer and you've got 3,000 followers, don't you think that every person who follows you is also following all these other national writers? You don't need to retweet and comment on it. But disagree? I don't want to see in my timeline 50 people retweeting the same news.
Well, but I think this is
maybe that's a me problem because I follow so many college football people.
That's probably true. Also, you're in it, right? Like I'm in it too.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting.
Like that's why I never retweet any national news. Like I'll tweet stuff. I have a lot of Vanderbilt followers because of my job as a sideline reporter, and some people follow me for that. So if there's some interesting Vanderbilt news from someone out, a national person like Vanderbilt's hiring a new linebackers coach, I'll retweet that because I know there's people on my timeline specifically that are interested in that. But I don't pretend to say anyone on my timeline needs to know stuff that Bruce Feldman's breaking. Like,
no, I think what it is what people should want if they follow you or me. Let's say just using us as an example and stare at our navels for a second.
Yeah,
it is our opinions of that news that they want. That's the key. Like,
right, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just like the retweets and like,
big
news.
You've curated.
Oh my.
Well, listen, we could go deep on this. Like, why does everyone need to tweet like condolences when someone they never met has died? Like, I don't that's about you, dude. Like, that's about you. But I don't understand.
Someone gets hurt in college football and you have 9,000 people.
Like, thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers.
I love injuries.
Yes, I'm a huge injury guy. Right.
The more ACLs, the better.
Huge injury guy. Yeah. All right, I want to get to Vanderbilt, but last one here, and this is another narrative that's out there about recruiting being like the only thing that matters. And I want to say to fans outside of the SEC, to people listening who are SEC fans, like, do you really believe, like, you're a recruiting editor? I used to be a recruiting editor. We've lived in the recruiting space for a long time. I don't think anyone thinks that you just sign 5 stars and then just win championships. Like, I think outside people that are not in the SEC think that we in the SEC prop up these rankings like they are the end all be all, when I think all we ever do with those is just say, this is the starting point. And if you're running a 1,000 meter race and I'm starting at 300 meters and you're starting at 0, I'm ahead of you. And
I'll be very succinct here. You can't win national titles unless you're recruiting top 5 classes. But just because you're recruiting top 5 classes doesn't mean you'll win national titles.
You almost stole my line there that I've used for a long time, which is just because you have great players doesn't make you a great team, but every single great team starts with great players.
Yeah, and Ari talks about this all the time because people get on him. Like our podcast is called Stars Matter because like they think that's all he says is that stars matter, and they do. But the great coaches are great evaluators. Look at Georgia. Who was their best player? Maybe Jordan Davis, 3-star. Alabama.
D'Amico Ryans was a 3-star.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs was a 3-star running back, and they're just not hoarding 5 stars for the most part. They're hoarding and taking the 5 stars that they feel are best for their program, and they're recruiting their 4 stars and their 3 stars. They're evaluating talent very well, and they're coaching them up. So you need great players, but that does not mean you will win just because you have them.
Which to me leads us into the narrative about the SEC is being carried by Alabama at the top. And while Alabama is in outer space, now you've got Georgia and A&M recruiting in outer space also. But the idea that Auburn and Tennessee and I guess maybe even South Carolina, LSU, Arkansas, Florida, I think under Billy Napier is going to do this. Like that next tier still recruits significantly higher than the vast majority of other conferences. And some of that's because the players are here and we can get into a million reasons why, but like it just means more and recruiting budgets and there's a million reasons. But do you buy that this narrative that the SEC is just propped up by the top? Because I think that's what a lot of fans in other leagues cling to. Oh, it's just Alabama. They're carrying you. The rest of your league sucks. And I'm like, are you sure about that? Because Kentucky's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I mean, every league is going to have bad teams, and with something that hurts the SEC is the coaching transitions. You can have a school that has, I'll use South Carolina's example. Their roster was not very good this year, and I think it was a very soft. Give that staff credit, Shane Beamer, for going 6-6 in the regular season, but that was not a very good team this year. And you look at the recruiting classes, they probably average. I get right over my shoulder here. They probably average like a number 22 class in the country over the last 5 years. So they should have a better roster. But they've had coaching turnover and guys leave and stuff like that. So you can't just look back at recruiting classes, especially when the era of the transfer portal. So no, I don't buy the narrative that it's propped by the SEC. It's they by the top teams. It's by far the deepest league, and the numbers bear it out, and they've got the best players in the league, and it's undeniable.
To me, the facts are the best players on the majority come from here. They are put into the NFL at a higher rate from here in the SEC, meaning the Southeast. And they've also won a Southeastern footprint team has won like 21 of the last 24 national championships. And that I think all of that is sort of just like factual information. I do think SEC fans need to be self-aware, and I agree with what you're saying that the fact that it quote unquote just means more and that we put more pressure as a conference on our coaches to succeed. Like, look what Auburn's doing right now to Brian Harsin. Like, I think that is cannibalistic to some degree. I think the SEC eats itself because of the pressure to win, because of all the like giving Kirk Ferentz 18 years and Paul Chryst all that time, and Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, and Dave Clawson at Wake Forest. And this is what Mark Stoops is doing, and Mitch Barnhart in Kentucky is doing better than everybody else, which is, and I think we'll talk about Vanderbilt in a second, but I think this is what Vanderbilt should do with Jerry Stackhouse, which is just be patient and invest. And the SEC is not good at that. We have to be very self-aware of saying we're not good at patience, and it hurts us a lot of times.
Yeah, well, credit Kentucky for being self-aware and knowing who it is and where it is on the food chain. And there were times when, Mark Stoops, if he got fired, I mean, I don't have his Wikipedia page in front of me, but you could say, yeah, I see why they're making a move, but they were smart enough to know that he was a very good coach and he was slowly building things. And I mean, the culture of Kentucky football is very different from the culture of Kentucky basketball, and and credit Mitch Barnhart for recognizing that. So yeah, I think they are the, it's easy to sit here and say Wake Forest, he was patient with Dave Clawson, and Vanderbilt was patient with Bobby Johnson, 15 years ago, finally got through the bowl game. But the climate and the culture at a state university is far different. Yeah. So that's why, that's what, to your point, that's why Kentucky deserves that credit for being patient. Now, how long, let's just say Mark Stoops, would they go this year? 10, whatever let's say 10 wins. Let's say he goes 8-4 for 3 straight years. They give fans a taste of 10 wins. Or are they going to be happy with 8 wins?
I know what you're saying, but 8-4 is pretty damn good for Kentucky when that's like your downswing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
Like I think South Carolina, Missouri, I think Tennessee, Auburn, I think a lot of fan bases in the SEC could benefit from just a little bit more patience. And that's an us problem because I think other leagues and other teams, I think Utah is an example of unbelievably great investment and patience and buy-in to a culture and an identity. I think that, I think the teams that do that aren't Alabama and Ohio State will benefit from that. And I think it will happen. All right. So any other narratives you want to bust here about the SEC? Did we cover it all?
I don't think we covered it all, but I think we covered a lot. Yeah,
we got a lot. There's a lot of things SEC fans we can do better. Quit being as obnoxious on Twitter. Maybe give your coach a little bit more time. We mentioned all the classy things last week on the show that you should do. But by and large, I hope we gave you guys some information and some data and some tools to maybe argue some of these anti-SEC points a little bit smarter and with some backup stuff. All right, quickly, let's talk a little Vanderbilt here if you're cool with that. Just sure. Where is the approval rating for Clark Lee amongst Vanderbilt fans as he goes into year 2? And what, a 21 game SEC losing streak? Not all of which is his doing.
I don't know. I'm not just saying that because I really don't, but it sounds about right. It's the fact that he's an alum and loves being the head coach at Vanderbilt, I think that helps him a lot. The first season, I wouldn't call it a debacle by any stretch, but the team was far less competitive than I think most people envisioned. Now, I think what we realized is the talent level is extremely down. And I'm not saying this to defend Clark Lee or anything. I looked this up and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but James Franklin inherited a program in 2011. I think had 11 of the 22 starters, or they had 11 guys who eventually played in the NFL. And they weren't just, they were all mostly upperclassmen contributors in those first two teams. So give that staff credit. James Franklin, Bob Shoop, John Donovan, they did a great job with them. But I mean, you look at Vanderbilt last year, how many guys on that roster are going to play in the NFL? I mean, maybe some young guys. I don't know if I see any, so the talent level was clearly down. I mean, they got better. They were, these are just catchwords or cliches. They definitely competed all the way down to the end of the Tennessee game, falling down. What was it like? Looked like it was going to be a 72-0 game, and they battled and got it to within 17 in the third quarter. Whatever. But I think the buy-in from the players was pretty good, and I think I was going to bring this point up earlier, but I'll save it. The recruiting was very good. I mean, he finished, I think, the number 31 class, which is last in the SEC. It's
one of the best Vanderbilt classes ever.
But it would have been like third in the Pac-12, fourth in the ACC,
right,
fifth in the Big Ten. So, I think he has a vision, and I think that school will be incredibly patient with him. I think they've got a very interesting situation at quarterback this year. Ken Seals had a really good freshman year, regressed a little bit. Mike Wright came in and showed a lot of playmaking ability, but really not consistent enough throwing the ball. One of their top recruits was AJ Swan, a kid they flipped from Maryland, who was in the Under Armour All-American game. I don't think he's going to start as a true freshman, but when you've been around long enough, when has Vanderbilt been, every time Vanderbilt's been good, it's because they've had a good quarterback. Kyle Shermer was very good. Jay Cutler didn't break through and go to a bowl game, but they had really good offenses. So it's very difficult for Vanderbilt to be good without a very good quarterback, without a difference maker quarterback. So they need one of those guys to step up. They lost 2 starters in the offensive line in the portal. That hurts. Some coaching staff turnover, lost their defensive coordinator, Jesse Mentor, to Michigan there. So how much better will they be this year? I can't sit here and say they're going to be a lot better other than the continuity of the second year of a regime.
Do you think, and we had Barton on the show probably about this time last year, actually, Barton Simmons, former 24/7 guy, who's I believe his title is general manager of football operations. I believe
just general manager,
something like that. Yeah. First of all, do you think that Clark Lee sort of like rebuild the program, leadership style, doing things very holistically behind the scenes with guys like Barton and other people that are approaching sort of roster development and evaluation? Do you think that's especially with the transfer portal and how you have to manage your roster now 24 hours a day, do you think that is the way other teams are going to go? Do you think it's been successful for him? What are your thoughts on the makeup of the
I don't know how much, Barton has a fancy title and probably has a lot of quote unquote power because he's Clark's really good friend from childhood, and Clark like values his opinion, and like they're in lockstep together. I don't know how much the structure is really that different than other programs. I mean, again, like there's other schools that have come up with that title, general manager. I don't think he's the only one. It's just, you got to trust your process. And I think Barton Simmons is a really smart guy. I thought he would do well, and I think he is doing well. I just think they've got to be a little bit smarter, and they've got to have a little bit higher hit rate than other schools, because they're not recruiting, by volume. They're looking for I'm sure he tells you all the same thing. They're looking for projectable guys. Like he'll talk about some of the athletic ability, like go watch this basketball clip of this safety we just signed, look at his athleticism. Is he going to play as a freshman? Probably not. But by the time he's a junior, he'll be just as good as those juniors, as those safeties who were rated 200 spots higher than him. So I just think it's about evaluating and coaching them up. And that's something that, Bobby Johnson was able to do later in his career as they got a lot more competitive, and the James Franklin staff did. And there was a little window there where Derek Mason was what has been shown at Vanderbilt. It's not impossible, which quite honestly, I graduated from Vanderbilt in 1993. I thought it was impossible. I just, if you ever told me that Vanderbilt would win 18 games in a 2-year stretch like James Franklin did, would never, ever, ever, ever believed it. And, is this program ever going to be, here's something that Barton Simmons and Clark Lee don't subscribe to, which they shouldn't, because they're the coach and GM there. But I think we can sit here and say, will Vanderbilt ever be a consistent top tier team in the SEC? No, but there's no reason why they can't have those blips like we've seen over the past 10, 15 years.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I think that also comes with a couple of other factors, which is commitment, investment, and all this other stuff. And so I want to package two questions sort of together into one here, which is number one, do you think we have seen Vanderbilt turn some sort of financial corner with all the allowing donations to go directly to the athletic department and all the renovations that are coming and sort of the buy-in around what
100%. It's better than it's ever been in my. Yeah.
So you think a full turn of the corner that now they are focused
they have a chancellor who cares.
Okay. So follow up to that is the thing we talked about with name, image, and likeness last week, and the thing that I've harped on, every new rule in college football is always going to benefit the best team, like period number one. Sure. But I do think that there are spaces and spots, in particular at schools with large fan bases that have major resources. Tennessee, Arkansas, South Carolina, I think are three. I think there's some other ones outside of the SEC, that Nebraska, for example, Wisconsin, Iowa, that should be capitalizing on leveraging their fan base to help lure recruits through name, image, and likeness. Vanderbilt doesn't have the fan base, but they do have some major dollar players. Do you think Vanderbilt can fall into that category of, we're going to leverage all of the money we have to acquire talent? Does that make sense?
I don't know. I'm fascinated to see where this falls in 5 years. Because, when we were thinking name, image, and likeness, you're thinking of local businesses and getting kids involved and promoting their brand. Well, what we've seen happen is it's more the NIL collectives. And if you haven't read about NIL, you can read about it elsewhere, but Stu Mandel and Dave Elbin.
We talked about it for 20 minutes.
So your audience is educated. Where basically what it's been is a non-sanctioned booster club raising money to lure recruits, which is not what NIL is supposed to be and what the rules state they're not supposed to be. But right now there's no one to govern it, and that's what's happening. So can Vanderbilt compete in that arena? No, I don't think so. Can they compete in other arenas, being in Nashville, Tennessee, and having some big boosters at prominent, companies and all that? Sure. I'm sure they can do some things, but honestly, they're not right now. And, Barton will tell you, he said, in a few years, we hope to be doing this, but right now they're not recruiting kids who live in that space. They're not recruiting a kid who's deciding whether or not to take $250,000 from Georgia or go to Vanderbilt and take nothing.
Why shouldn't they be though? Because
no, that's what Barton says. Right now, they're not in that space. They're not out recruiting Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee or schools. They're in their.
So the numbers we've tossed around on the show and the numbers that are tossed around out there are, if you want to recruit top 10 classes, you need to be in that $20 to $25 million range per year, and that then gets paid out over the course of a 4-year college career. Let's even go down let's go down a tier from that, and let's just say 10 million per year. There are 3 boosters, a couple of which you and I know personally, that could write that kind of check every single year without even noticing it's a rounding error in their bank account. Why would they not spin up the collective as fast as possible to get that thing working so that they can elevate and go after a different player?
Sure. That's a good point. I think, and I'm not speaking for anyone, I think Barton would tell you that you're kind of getting someone for the wrong reason. You know, if you're buying him for $300,000 to come to Vanderbilt when he would have no interest in going to Vanderbilt for any other reason, it's probably not going to work out.
Well,
I'm just kind of thinking this.
No. And we talked about this last week on the show, but like, what you're going to need is the person running the collective for your school and the head coach to have some sort of illegal communication about talent valuation. Like,
that's no doubt. That's what's happening. I mean, a collective, whether it's Tennessee, Washington, Ohio, you know, they're not recruiting for they're not recruiting who they want. They're recruiting who you want. They're just being told, this is the defensive tackle that we need.
Yep. All right. Expectations for Vanderbilt in 2022. What do you think?
I think to establish a quarterback, whether it's Mike Wright, Ken Seals, or freshman AJ Swan, and this sounds so basic, just to show some improvement. And it's like that, you know, I always say all 3 and 8s or 4 and 8s and 3 and 9s aren't created equally. Did you lose 6 games by 7 points or fewer, or did you get your ass kicked and get blown out? So, I mean, that's the beauty of coaching at Vanderbilt, is that that's why people apply for the job, and it's a desirable job because the school's patient. He's not going to be measured on his record this year. He's going to be measured on what is he doing in years 5, 6, and 7. Now, it becomes easier in 5, 6, and 7 if you show a lot of improvement in year 2. So I just think the expectation should be to be more competitive than they were in year 1.
That was our Vanderbilt State of the Union with former editor of the Commodore Report, right? Did I get that right?
I was a publisher.
/owner / creator of the Commodore Report?
I was publisher, and my colleague Bill Trocchi was the editor.
Mitch Light. At Mitch Light on Twitter, of course, the recruiting editor now for The Athletic. He's got the podcast there, Stars Matter, with Ari Wasserman every Thursday. You can catch him everywhere. We hope we debunked some myths for you guys out there, gave you some tools to use in your arguments with your buddies about SEC football and the narratives and the media bias and all that great stuff. Maybe also, hopefully, we all learned some stuff and got a little smarter along the way. Make sure you go to Jasper's, everybody. Free parking, great food, excellent place to watch the game. You still got NCAA tournament games. You got Nashville Predators games. You got all kinds of great stuff over there. So obviously, Erin will be back next week. We everybody thinking about her. And Mitch, thank you for stepping in and having a thoughtful conversation with us. We appreciate it.
Enjoyed. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you guys all for listening. My name is Braden Gall. Get to me on Twitter at Braden Gall, at 440 Sports, the YouTube page, all that great stuff. This has been Fringe Element here on the 440 Sports Network.